We'll let the concept of the sixth Animorph lead us into the gameplay side of the discussion with this question. Should you play as one character or as the whole team? Which answer you choose will directly affect the kind of game you're going to make. Each of the official games are based on controlling one character, though they each have wildly different takes on it. The Game Boy Color game designates characters to specific missions and gives you no say into which Animorph you play at any given time. Shattered Reality lets you choose from 4 characters before a level, though the difference between them is entirely cosmetic. Know the Secret lets you rotate between the 4 Animorphs at will, but you're still only controlling one Animorph at a time, with the exception of turn-based combat, and again, the difference between the 4 Animorphs is cosmetic. The majority of video games use the single character model because it's the easiest to wrap your head around. One player, one character, easy peasy. Most of the games commenters cited as possible models to work from were single player games. JSH357 suggested Thief, Gatorboy Mike and Tic Tac Tickinson suggested Metal Gear Solid, and Malreza Arwin and Star Wars Nerd 1000 suggested Arkham City for their various types of stealth gameplay, a style of game that doesn't work when controlling 4 to 6 characters in real time. Open world games like Grand Theft Auto, as suggested by Bag2218, Similar Individual, and Philip Babb, are also traditionally one character, or at least one character at a time. Of course, there is narrative justification for a single character game, as the books are first person and the majority from a single narrator, Megamorphs and occasional Odd Duck books aside. But then again, very few of the books have the narrator working out the problem by themselves. Even when a character is off-screen, so to speak, they are usually still active in the plot unless they are immobilized by an Andalite brain flu or something. At the very least, you should rotate which character you control, and in my opinion, should be able to choose which one before a mission. And I'd love to see each character have a unique feel with their own strengths and weaknesses. Cassie is faster and more efficient in morphing, Rachel is better in combat, Marco is good with computers. Give the players a problem and then present different solutions based on which Animorphs you select. Controlling the Animorphs as an entire group limits our options heavily. If a designer decided to go this route, the first question they need to ask is if the game will be in real time or turn-based. Turn-based is a bit easier to manage. It favors RPG elements and strategic combat. Games like Final Fantasy Tactics or XCOM are great models for turn-based small group combat, and offer ideas of what to do outside of combat, either with information and resource management or with just straight-up story segments. Unless you guys know something I don't know, the only game style that could work for real-time management of groups between sizes of 4 and 6 is real-time strategy games, but I don't think that style really gels well with small group management. RTS games are usually about building up your forces and treating them as expendable resources, while your goal of an Animorphs game should be to keep every single member of the team alive because you can't afford to lose anyone in this situation. Animorphs tends to be about those gut punch moments, and RTSs are too impersonal for that. Games have played around with having combat active NPCs. The recent Resident Evil games have you team up with a supporting character that is active in combat, healing, and item management. But that's just one supporting character, which tends to be glitchy enough. Imagine trying to manage the AI of 5 supporting characters, each with their own morphs and abilities. It would be a madhouse. The only other reasonable option for group gameplay is if they made it exclusively multiplayer, with a different player playing a different Animorph. Now, lots of games have multiplayer options, but few outside of MMOs are exclusively online. And between Diablo 3 and the new SimCity game, always online games are getting a bit of a critical flack lately. MMOs are even more impractical because, well, the name is Massive Multiplayer Online Game, and I wouldn't exactly call 6 characters massive. If you wanted to make an Animorphs MMO, you would have to come at it from a completely unique direction. Shauna Augustus agrees, suggesting a game where you select the side of the Animorphs or the Yeerks and do a lot of PvP against each other. In a conversation with a friend, we ended up brainstorming an Animorphs MMO where you don't actually play any of the Animorphs, but as normal, non-morphing humans made aware of the Yeerk invasion. People like those seen in the chat room in number 16 The Warning. People like Crazy Fran and Mr. Perkins from the TV show. A community espionage game. People would have to find each other in a sea of NPC characters, half of which are Yeerk-controlled. They have to find ways to secretly communicate with each other, and should one of them get found out, their character gets taken over by a Yeerk and control is removed from the player. This might be the one game model that can capture the sense of paranoia in the books, having no idea who you can trust and not being able to reload a save if you get it wrong. It might give the MMO genre a breath of fresh air from all the stupid World of Warcraft clones, but this all comes at the expense of not being able to play the actual Animorphs. Every possible decision you make unfolds into new problems and more decisions. How games get published so often is beyond me. What about morphing? It's the key gimmick to the series. If there's one thing you have to have, it's that. You could change all the characters into weird Angry Bird knockoffs and have them fight an evil Zoltar fortune-telling machine. Just make sure they can morph. The problem with morphing, however, is that every animal you can change into will change the gameplay, oftentimes significantly. You have to factor in a new control scheme, flying physics, swimming physics, sticking to wall physics, and if you really want to get as detailed as the book, each animal would have its own modified sense of sight, sound, and smell to negotiate. Oh, and then there's the whole fighting the animal's instinct thing, though I think you could probably just make that a quick time event thing. Ted47 suggests putting morphs into different categories, like battle morphs, stealth morphs, and travel morphs. This would help limit the amount of alternate control schemes you'd need to design, while still creating the illusion of wide variety, since each battle morph is a reskin over a basic battle morph model. Maybe tiny variances in speed and power, but they all play the same. Mr. Mprint disagrees, feeling that each morph should feel totally unique. Mr. Eligos builds on Ted's category model by including skill trees for each category, which would add a level of personalization, which might be the best of both worlds here. Oh, and also the 2-hour time limit thing. That has a greater effect on gameplay than you'd think. If, say, you wanted to play things in real time and have an actual 2-hour time limit, then you'd need large, expansive levels to justify it. Or levels that have a lot of sit and wait stealth, but only the most die-hard of stealth gamers would tolerate that for 2 hours. To compress the time limit in any way, taking it down to an hour or 20 minutes or 2 minutes or whatever would dramatically change the pacing. The more pressing the time limit is, the more the game would have to be combat-oriented rather than stealth-oriented. And how would you even implement the time limit if we go with the turn-based combat model? The Woo Guy 8T88 suggests having the time limit be optional, as a kind of difficulty level, like the hardcore mode in Fallout New Vegas. To me, though, that only seems to complicate the problem, because these levels have to be either made to have the time limit or not to have the time limit, and to play in the fashion these levels were not designed around might make things off-kilter. It's a balancing act in an art form driven by committee. Point of entry, playing a singular character or a team, and how to implement morphing are arguably the three biggest questions we must answer to form the shape of an Animorphs video game. But the thing about the property is that it is so multifaceted, has so many ideas and themes and outrageous scenarios, it's impossible to adapt without leaving something sizable out. And there's always going to be someone who thinks that whatever was cut was vital to the Animorphs experience. Is it possible to make combat properly traumatic and not fun? Is it possible to create dialogue trees complex enough to handle all the possible philosophical avenues? Is there a morality system that can handle the million shades of gray that the heroes have to face every day? How do we work the tensions of a secret alien invasion? Do we keep the series in the 90s, or try to work it around smartphones and high-speed internet and the war on terror? Do we even bother with the Ellimist, the Krayak, the Chi, time travel, the crazier soft sci-fi ideas like that? A lot of people commented on different ways to get the Animorphs into video game format, but the most interesting one for me was Kendall Cratch's suggestion of an RTS game taking place in the larger universe surrounding Animorphs. The universe of Animorphs is incredibly huge, but only seen through a small handful of limited perspectives, so there is a lot of room for expanded universe material. The best Star Wars games are those who take place in an expanded universe. This way you get an Animorphs game that doesn't step on the toes of the movie or TV show, or whatever's motivating the production of this game. It's a game that can do pretty much anything it wants without fans crying foul. You know, this might all seem like a trap, to lure your ideas out and disassemble them one by one. But I assure you it's not. As the books passed the halfway point and started descending into its inevitable conclusion, fan speculations began to shift from, I wonder what's going to happen next, to, wouldn't it be better if, finally reaching its peak with the series' heavily controversial conclusion. Now, this is not about being anti-criticism, mind you. I'm the guy who reviews these books and assigns number grades. I'm the guy who doesn't think he needs to be a wizened old scholar to challenge the ideas of Joseph Campbell. What this is about is the realization towards the complexity of things, which is something I feel we take for granted. Sure, the technical complexities of a video game are different from the creative complexities of a book, but when it comes down to a lot of fandoms, these complexities tend to be ignored full sail. I'm not saying any one of you specifically have done that, just as a general thing. Back when it was discovered that Animorphs was now being ghostwritten, there was a sizable backlash from people who didn't really understand the position they were arguing against. The same goes for people who keep insisting that Annie-TV should have been animated, despite the fact that production costs would have quadrupled. Sure, there hasn't been that kind of fandom backlash on video games, so a lot of you didn't even know these games existed, but I felt that, considering all the technical complexities of video game production, this was a good time to bring this up. This is not about making excuses, just about bringing people to a higher frame of mind. Complexities don't stop Megamorphs 2 from being a shitty book, doesn't stop On the Run from being a shitty episode, and doesn't stop the Game Boy Color game from being a shitty Pokemon knockoff. But it is important to know why that is in a deeper way. This is why I include all the behind-the-scenes stuff I can find in these videos, though it's sometimes so scant I have to hunt down old-school television directors to get anywhere. Creative thinking and critical thinking go hand in hand in just about everything, and that's going to be really important as we go down to the second half of the Animorphs book series. Now, this won't happen for a while now, but my next major Animorphs side project will be concerning Animorphs fanfiction, as fanfiction is a major part of any fandom experience. I'm going to look at 6 different pieces of fanfiction, 3 written while the series was still being published, and 3 after it ended, and one of them being largely based off the TV show. I plan to do a lot of hunting and reading, and if you have suggestions, I'm all ears. Good ones, bad ones, crossovers, icky ones, it's all fair game. But first, I think we have another book to review.